Start reading the book. Think Straight. Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life by Darius Forox. And we will start with a quote by William James. If you can change your mind, you can change your life. We should start with the first title, You Become What You Think. In 1869, a 27-year-old man who had just graduated as a doctor of medicine from Harvard was going through a crisis of meaning. This was not the first time he dealt with adversity. Throughout his 6 years in medical school, his education was interrupted by different illnesses and bouts of depression. But this time it was worse. He even contemplated suicide for months. The young man's name was William James, who later became the leading psychologist in America and one of the founders of the philosophical school of pragmatism. It took James 3 years to overcome depression, something he did by himself. To be clear, James wasn't just feeling down. John McDermott, editor of the writings of William James, wrote about the severity of his mental state. James spent a good part of his life rationalizing his decision not to commit suicide. During this time, James also had panic attacks and hallucinations. This wasn't new to him. His father faced the same agonizing things years before him. This fate made James believe that his condition was biological and therefore something he couldn't overcome. But in 1870, James made a psychological breakthrough after reading an essay by Charles Renouvier, a French philosopher. In his journal, he wrote, I think that yesterday was a crisis in my life. I finished the first part of Renouvier's second essays and see no reason why his definition of free will, the sustaining of a thought because I choose to when I might have other thoughts, need be the definition of an illusion. At any rate, I will assume for the present until next year this is no illusion. My first act of free will shall be to become in free will. This realization is at the core of pragmatism, the school of philosophy that James and Charles Sanders Peirce founded years later. James realized that we have the ability to choose one thought over the other. In other words, we can control what we think. However, James doesn't say we can control our consciousness. When we sit down and observe our thoughts for a few minutes, we will notice that a lot of things will flow through our mind. The thoughts are just there, nothing we can change about that. But since we have free will, we can decide which thoughts we focus on. Hence, we can influence the direction of consciousness. This realization is critical to the way we live. It's the difference between I can't help but feel this way and I feel this way because I decided to feel this way. The emphasis is on deciding, and that's what this book is about. With practice, you can get better at controlling your thoughts so you can decide what you think. And with better control over our thoughts, we can improve the quality of our lives and the outcome of our careers. That's my proposition in this book. You have the ability to decide what you think, and since the result of your life depends on your thoughts, I decide it's the most important thing in life. When we improve the way we think, nothing is impossible to achieve. That simple realization changes everything. Many great thinkers have written about the importance of thoughts, but James William Godfather Ralph Waldo Emerson, who also inspired James a great deal, put it most simply: you become what you think about. Why do we need a book on practical thinking? The human brain is the most important tool we have. It's more important than any technology, device, or instrument. Robert Greene, the author of Mastery, put it best: if there is any instrument you must fall in love with and fetishize, it is the human brain, the most miraculous, awe inspiring information processing tool devised in the known universe, with a complexity we can't even begin to fathom, and with dimensional powers that far outstrip any piece of technology in sophistication and usefulness. However, there's one problem: we are born with this great tool, but we don't know how to use it properly. We are highly impractical begins. We think that we are good thinkers, but research paints a different picture. We think we make practical decisions that we base on logic, but that's not the case. As Dan Ariely, author of Predictable Irrationally, writes, we usually think of ourselves as sitting in the driver's seat with ultimate control over the decisions we made and the decisions our life takes. But alas, this perception has more to do with our desires, with how we want to view ourselves than with reality. It's safe to say we are not practical thinkers. The proof of that is the list of more than 100 cognitive biases that scientists have found over the last century. We often make decisions based on gut feelings, emotions, and without having the right information. I have read I have read several books about better thinking and decision making. I liked them, but I had one problem with all the books in this field: they weren't practical. They do a great job of describing why we think the way we think by sharing stories, but I couldn't find a practical book that explained how to change the way you think. That's why I wrote this tight little book. It contains everything I have learned about thinking. My goal is to give you at least one idea that you can use to improve your thoughts and consequently your life, business, or career. That's why I share all my ideas here. I wrote things straight in a way that you can read it more than once. And I hope this book serves as an anchor to you, especially during trying times. To keep this book practical, I combine theory, stories, and personal experiences to share advice you can apply. The first idea I want to share is that these types of books only work if you are open minded. Use what works. I am not a neuroscientist, psychologist, philosopher, or any type of expert on the topic of thinking. I am a person who has lived his entire life under the impression that you can't control your thoughts. That way of thinking didn't serve me well. I was happy one day, sad the next. I got angry easily, and I couldn't find solutions to simple challenges I faced in my career, business, and relationships. But through experience, journaling, reading, and a lot of introspection, I have found a way to get better at thinking. How do I know I am better at thinking than before? I am no longer a slave to my thoughts, and I am much happier because of it. I use my mind, and it's no longer the other way around. To me, that's the definition of better thinking. It has nothing to do with how smart you are or how many mathematical equations can you solve. It's about using your mind to get what you want. I don't pretend to have all the answers to thinking better thought. However, I do have the answers to how I have used nothing but my thoughts to live a happier, healthier, wealthier, and more meaningful life. I am living proof of the change your thoughts, change your life idea. Only 3 years, short years ago, I was stressed out of my mind, gave up my entrepreneurial desires, and hated my life. I felt stuck. But I don't want to be too dramatic about my situation. I think we have all been there. And if you haven't felt stuck in your life, it's only a matter of time before you will. It's a natural part of modern day life. I'm not trying to scare you, though, but you know how all these self-help books go, right? I was down and out. I lost all my money. I was depressed. My life sucked. But then I discovered X and then my life changed. X is, of course, the idea they want to sell. Since I'm honest with you, I am no different. For example, in this book, I want to sell you on the idea of useful and useless thoughts. But there's a difference. I'm giving you my perspective, nothing more. But it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with it. John Dewey, a pragmatist and one of the fathers of functional psychology, famously said, the true is that which works. But that doesn't mean we should believe everything we hear or read. That makes us delusional. If we want to think straight at all times, clear thinking requires training. I view the mind as a muscle that requires regular training to keep strong. One way to train your mind is by learning new things. But I always thought that learning ends when your education ends. For some, that's when they leave high school. For others, it's when they get their bachelor's or master's degree. During our time in school, we learn new skills, ideas, and theories that change the way we think and operate in the world. But once we have established a way of thinking, we hardly change it. We prefer to entertain the same thoughts because they give us a sense of familiarity. We have changed that. Novelty is a scary thing, so we do everything to avoid it. We are creatures of habit who prefer relaxing our mind instead of straining it. I need to relax and watch something on Netflix is something I hear almost everyone of all ages say these days. I have said it myself as well. That makes me wonder what we need rest from the perspective from the repetitive task we do at work, from the familiar thought patterns we have. If you really think about it, we hardly strain our minds unless there's a specific reason, like a test or exam we have to take. Otherwise, we often think, what's the point? Well, the point is to train your mind just like you train your body to keep fit. You don't go to the gym for 4 years and quit for the rest of your life. So, why don't you exercise your mind the same way you do your body? What's more, the mind is the single most important tool you have. And if you want to use that tool properly, you must train the mind. Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it best: the life of wisdom is a life of lesson. It is important to learn how to think clearly. Clear thinking is not a haphazard enterprise, it requires proper training. The problem is that we don't know how we must get proper training. As Epictetus put it, for most of my life, my thoughts were out of my control. I never thought about thinking. If you asked me to draw my thoughts, it would look like something like this. That mess you see up there is how the inside of my mind looked like. It was pure chaos. just a mush of positive, negative, sad, happy, and above all, confusing thoughts. I always thought to myself, why can't my brain stop? Where's the pause button? Looking back, I didn't know how to use my brain as the wonderful tool it is. From chaos to clarity. In 2014, I moved to London from Leeuwarden, the Netherlands, the city where I grew up. I went from a city with 100,000 people to a city with 7 million people live. Things were harder than I expected, especially when it came to finding a place to live. After doing research and talking to my new coworkers, I learned that it was almost impossible to find an apartment in a short period without getting ripped off. Instead, I decided to rent a room, which was a lot easier for 3 months, and I decided to explore different areas in London that were within an hour commute by public transport to my work. That was my plan, and everything went well at first. After 2 months, I found a small and affordable one bedroom apartment in Earlsfield in southwest London. I had planned everything. I cancelled the lease of the room I rented and signed the lease for the new apartment. My parents and brother even drove from the Holland to help out. And because I didn't have much stuff, we could just use their car to move my things from the old place to the new, which were only 10 minutes apart. In my mind, this would be the deal. I would just pack up my stuff, get the key to the new place, hand the keys back to the old landlord, and move into the new place, watch Netflix, and relax. Also, I expected to do everything on the same day. Well, things didn't go as planned after all. My new landlady changed her mind last minute and decided not to rent out her apartment. She told me this a day before the day I planned the move. All of a sudden, I had no place to live and had an SUV full of my things. That night, in my parents' hotel room, I panicked big time. I don't know what to do. I have no place. My stuff is in a van. I brought you guys over from Holland, and now I'm sitting here like an idiot. I continued blaming myself for the rest of the day and evening. You are probably thinking, really, yes, looking back on this, I can't help but think that I may have acted a little bit too dramatic. Well, let's just call it like it was. I was over dramatic and not just a little. That's exactly why I panicked out. This example, because it shows how stupid I was in my thinking. I spent so much time in my head that I had lost sight of the situation. I wasn't thinking clearly, and for what some first world problem common. The next day, I woke up, and with the encouragements of my parents and brother, I decided to stop feeling sorry for myself and start finding a solution instead. I said to myself, think straight. I knew I had to replace the mess with clarity. I wanted to get straight to the point. I pictured this on the left a mush of useless thoughts, worry, stress, suffering, confusion, not knowing what to do. On the right, one straight thought that has a single useful purpose. I wanted to start using my mind as a tool. In the case of my London story, I needed to look for a solution fast. It turned out that way easy. Once I started thinking straight, I booked an Airbnb until I found a new place. In the end, we stayed in an Airbnb for a week. The landlady changed her mind again and decided to rent the apartment to me anyway. So, all my stressing, worrying, and thinking were especially useless. How often does that happen? We are always so quick to judge and draw conclusions based on our assumptions. We are all human beings. We make mistakes, we change our minds, and we assume things that are not true all the time. That's normal. That's not normal. What's not normal is to let your mind go out of control. And after many other useless thinking episodes, I decided to change. I didn't have one big epiphany or super dramatic moment that forced me to change. Life is not a Hollywood drama. People that I know only change after a culmination of problems. At some point, we stand up and say, enough. And you know what? A lot of people never change at all. But that shouldn't be our concern. After years of chaos in my mind, I just had enough of mental suffering. I can't make it any prettier than that. You don't need an all is lost moment. Those type of moments almost never happen. About 2 years ago, I started changing my thoughts, and I have learned to replace the chaos in my mind with clarity. Now there's peace. In the rest of this book, I will share with you exactly how I did it. But first, I want to share a brief history of thinking. A very brief history of thinking. Thoughts are important, but not all thoughts are equal. The quality of your thoughts matter the most. Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius said it best. The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. A quick look at our surroundings show us that life is changing faster than ever. Jobs disappear, smartphones turn you into a zombie. Education costs you thousands. The cost of living increases rapidly. Salary don't. You have less time for yourself, and so on. Life changes so fast that it seems like you wake up in a new world every day. What do your thoughts make of that? If you are anything like me, these developments cause a lot of thinking, aka worrying and uncertainty. How do I survive? How do I adapt my business to changing markets? How do I advance my career? How do I not lose my mindset? Mastering your thoughts is challenging. The desire to master our thoughts is as old as modern civilization. Ever since the 5th century BC, philosophers from all ages and regions agree on one thing: the human mind is an instrument that solves problems. And many philosophers argue that the quality of your thoughts determine the quality of your life. From Confucius to Socrates to Descartes to William James, they all talk about their method of thinking, a way to view the world. Most of us know the Socratic method of questioning everything, even yourself. I know one thing, that I know nothing, is what Socrates famously told the oracle of Delphi when Socrates was declared the wisest man on earth. The fact that he thinks that he knows nothing makes him wise. That's a way of thinking. French philosopher Rene Descartes, who lived in the 17th century, took it one step further. He questioned everything in life, even his own existence. Because how do you know you are not dreaming or living in the matrix? That's why he famously said, cogito ergo sum, popularly translated to I think therefore I am. Descartes concluded that he must exist because he is able to think. No matter how crazy your thoughts are, it's safe to say that you do exist. So, why not make your existence a little more practical, light hearted, fun, and useful? Have you ever observed or written down your thoughts? I challenge you, try it for a day. Every 2 hours or so, sit down and write about what you are thinking at that very moment. Just don't get scared of yourself. Most of our thoughts make no sense at all. We are conflicted as a species. Descartes also reviewed his own thoughts and found many contradictions. His most important idea is that we should question the source of our beliefs, not the belief itself. Because most of our beliefs are based on our or other people's perception. How many of your ideas are based on what others have told you or based on your first thoughts or assumptions? At the core of thinking lies our ability to separate the truth from falsehood. What is true, what is false? One way to look at that question is to take a pragmatic perspective. William James describes the idea of pragmatism as follows: the attitude of looking away from first things, principles, categories, supposed necessities, and of looking towards last things, fruits, consequences, facts. Thoughts should serve a useful purpose. If they don't, they are useless. That's straight thinking. Pragmatism is a method of thinking, not a solution. In fact, all thinking is a method. Your thoughts serve as an instrument, but it's conflicting instrument that's very hard to use. Henry Ford said it best: thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few engage in it. Thinking is not only hard, it's the single most important thing in life. Remember, the quality of our thoughts determine the quality of our lives and our decisions as a result of our thoughts. Life is not linear. I always thought in a linear way. A leads to B, and if B is C, A also leads to C. It looked at appearances, first thoughts, and made a lot of assumptions. But my thoughts didn't serve a useful purpose. In fact, they served no purpose at all. Instead of thinking, I followed convention. I let others do the thinking for me. Most of us are like that. For example, I thought I would never have to worry about having a job if I got my college degree. I honestly believed that until I was about 26 years old. I figured out the hard way that nothing is guaranteed in life and that you have to work hard to earn money, and that making money has nothing to do with your degrees. If I had to pick another predictor of career success, I wouldn't say it's skills. The better you are at something, the more value you can put to others, and the more money people are willing to pay in exchange for your value. Also, achieving a goal never happens linearly. Most of us believe that there's a straight line from where you are to where you want to be. Let's say your goal is to start a business so you can have more freedom in your life. That was always my goal. I thought I would just work on it until I achieved it. But that's not how it worked out. I had to take a lot of detours. I worked for many other people in between. I also started businesses that failed. Understanding that life is not linear helps us to change the way we think. Along the way, I got discouraged a lot and almost quit. Now I realize that things often don't do according to plan. That helps me to think of backup plans or alternative options to get closer to my goals. Another personal goal of time mine was to invest in real estate, which I when I lived in London and Amsterdam, that was difficult for me because I didn't have enough capital to get started. So instead of putting a lot of pressure on myself to take to make more money and sacrifice the quality of my life, I started looking elsewhere. After researching growing real estate markets, I ended up in my hometown. Prices were low. I knew a lot of people. The population was increasing, and the city invested a lot in new businesses and education. 2 months after I decided to look elsewhere, I bought my first deal there. The point is that there are multiple ways to achieve your goals. Also, if everyone is doing one thing, that often means you shouldn't. Connect the dots. Your brain is constantly working even when you are not actively thinking. Apart from managing all the vital functions of your body, the brain also scans every piece of information that comes in. The brain compares it with other information that has already stored. Your brain searches for similarities and differences between that information. That's how we think and use our brain to come up with new ideas. The brain consists of many small networks of neurons that connect to other networks like this. Just a basic understanding of how my brain works helps me to understand how I can nurture it. I don't worry about finding a direct application for information I acquire. I feed my brain with knowledge that I am curious about, and that diverse information might be stored in different networks, but also as long as I connect the dots later, I am okay with that. Like Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. If you want the dots to connect in the future, you have the make sure you form dots in your brain. The only way you form dots is by learning, doing, making mistakes, reflecting, or anything you can do to feed your brain with the input it needs to give you the output you want. Filter your thoughts. There's too much information in the world for our brain to process, so we are forced to filter it. If you if we don't, we go nuts. And in that filtering process, we develop shortcuts to ease the cognitive load of making decisions. These shortcuts are called heuristics. A heuristic is a strategy we derive from previous experience with a similar problem. One heuristic that everyone knows is trial and error, a strategy for finding answers to problems we face. It's also a way of thinking, but trial and error is not always the most practical strategy. If we would rely on trial and error to build a career, we would probably die before achieving that goal. Life is too short for applying trial and error to everything. Another heuristic that's not practical is social proof. We often make decisions based on what others do or say. And my favorite heuristic is familiarity. It says that past behavior that led to good results is not a guarantee for future results. The familiarity heuristic also explains why we favor things and places we know over novelty. It's one of those things we see every day. We eat the same things, we walk the same route, we make the same mistakes, and we complete the same tasks at work over and over again. And then we complain that our lives are stuck or boring. No wonder you are making decisions based on familiarity. But who says that familiarity is always a good thing? It's good for certainty, but to achieve a breakthrough, you need something different. Making decisions based on heuristic techniques might ease the cognitive load, but they are far from practical. And often heuristics leads to unsatisfying outcomes. If that's the case, take it as a sign that you must change something. Instead of relying on heuristics to filter information and make decisions, rely on the main idea of pragmatism. True is what works, but don't take it too literally. Taking drugs works for me is what a contagious friend told me after I shared this idea with him. And he's right. You can't take this idea too literally. But what can you take literally in life? Take the platitude, good things come to those who wait. For example, I don't have to explain that it doesn't mean you should sit at home and wait forever until good things happen. Look at the true is what works idea as a filter that you can apply to all the information that goes into your brain. When faced with decisions, I ask myself, will the outcome of a decision change the way I live? If you ask that yourself consistently, you will find that you automatically filter out useless information and make decisions that have an actual impact on the outcome of your life. You force habit yourself to use whatever works, what's useful, and what impacts your habits. For example, conventional thinking says that bigger cities also bring you bigger opportunities. I really thought that was true. That's even the main reason I moved to London, and yes, I did seize a big opportunity for me at that time. But I also had bigger responsibilities and problems. Also, I don't like big cities. I hate crowded places, dirty area, and unreasonably high cost of living. Clearly, living in a big city didn't work for me. That way of thinking had a negative impact on the way I lived. That's why I eventually moved back to Leeuwarden. It's quite I know a lot of people here. I can work less, make more, and I can drive anywhere in the city within 10 minutes. However, I also realize that for most people, my way of living doesn't work. They might find it boring or not exciting enough. So, what works for you? Stop thinking. Thinking is difficult. I never knew how to stop. It's easy to stay inside your heads for hours, especially when you are in a bed at night. But I can confidently say that 99% of my thoughts in the past have been useless. I don't do anything with my thoughts most of the time. I didn't solve a problem, nor did I try to understand difficult ideas or concepts from books. I spend a lot of time in my head doing this. I called that thinking, but it was more like worrying, stressing, freaking out. Call it whatever you want. I call it a preoccupied mind, and with what the list goes on. I wonder what my boss thinks. What happens if I screw up and lose my job? I think he doesn't care about me. I just keep failing. Does she love me? Why does my life suck? Why is my life awesome and other people's lives are not? I don't care about my job. Is there something wrong with me? I can't finish anything. What's wrong with me? I want to quit. I just have one question for you. What's the practical use of the above thoughts? Yes, I am waiting. Still no answer exactly. Those types of thoughts are not helping us, but we all have them. So, how do you get rid of them? Well, I have learned that you can't get rid of them. Remember, we can't control our consciousness. We can only control what thoughts we follow through on. You only have to be aware of your thoughts, acknowledge them, but never blame yourself or what. Why do I have these thoughts? No one has the answer to that. It's better to be aware of your thoughts and decide what you will ignore and what you will give importance to. For example, the thought of quitting whatever I am doing in my life has been on my mind as long as I remember. When I was in high school, I wanted to quit and just find a job. When I played basketball, wanted to quit and later did quit. I can go on and on until I reach the present. No matter how much I love what I do, the thought of quitting and just walking away shows up in my mind at least 3 to 4 times a month. In the past those thoughts cost me many nights of sleep. About 2 years ago, I had enough. I wanted to quit thinking. So I started becoming aware of my thoughts instead of always acting on every single thought I had. You don't control me, I would say to myself like a weirdo, but it works. I am much calmer and happier because of it. When I want to quit, I still listen to it because sometimes it is a sign. But more often it's just fear, and I refuse to surrender to it, and neither should you. Inside your control versus outside your control. If you want to have useful thoughts, here's a rule of thumb: only think about things that you control. That automatically eliminates about 99% of your thoughts because there's very little you control in life. Only focus on what you control, things like your desire, action, words, intentions. What's a useless thought? Anything out of your control and without a useful purpose. Do you ever think about the past? That's the perfect example of a random thought that lacks a purpose. Unless you are reflecting on a past decision or mistake you made, in the case of reflection, you are doing something useful. But on other than that, every thought about the past serves no purpose. From that point of view, it's useless. Ever fantasize about the future? That's also useless. I have discovered two main types of useful thinking or thoughts. Thinking about how you can solve problems. A problem is just an unanswered question. Put your brain to use and think about how you can solve problems. There's a lot of those on this earth. Understanding knowledge. That means this Try to internalize knowledge and think about how you can use that knowledge to improve your life, career, work, relationships, etc. That's it. You can ignore every other thought. If you are constantly thinking without a useful purpose, it's because you hadn't trained your mind yet. You have to get out of your head. If not, you will go mental. Everyone will, no exception. Ask yourself, is that worth it? Do you really want to waste your time, energy, and life on useless thinking? Yes, you and I both know the answer to that. Commit to stop thinking about useless things. Start taking control of your mind. All that worrying about the past and the future is not going to help you. I never did. It never did, and it never will. Don't trust your mind. Have you ever made a decision that seemed illogical looking back? We are very logical beings. Every person creates their own social reality. The way you view the world is completely subjective because we all have cognitive biases. The concept of cognitive biases was introduced in 1972 by two psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. A cognitive bias is a systemic thinking error that impacts judgments and therefore our decisions. My favorite cognitive bias is the attentional bias. It's scientific evidence for the idea that your life is a result of your thoughts. The attentional bias states that our perceptions are affected by our thoughts, and naturally, our perceptions determine our actions and decisions, which make up our lives. If you have negative thoughts, you also have a negative perception of life. That's what it says. Our mind might be illogical, but it's also simple at the same time. Take one of the most well known cognitive biases, the confirmation bias. It explains the behavior of confirming our preconceptions. If you believe in something, you will try hard to find information, clues, and signs to back that up. In other words, you do everything to prove you are not wrong. Instead of looking at facts, you look at beliefs. And that's what all cognitive biases do. As of this writing, there are 106 decision making related cognitive biases known. I have read about most of them, and I have read several books and studied about cognitive biases too. My conclusion is that your mind can't be trusted. Maybe my conclusion is also a cognitive base. Who knows? What it comes down to this: avoid making decisions based on beliefs, obvious logic, and even science. Scientists are also human beings. That means they have their own cognitive bias. They are notorious for finding evidence for their preconceptions. The solution to making these decisions is not more knowledge. Instead, I have found that a pragmatic and neutral perspective leads to better information decisions. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as the best decision. If that was the case, we lived in a perfect world full of people who made logical and practical decisions. I like to look at it this way: there are only good informed and bad informed decisions. It's very appealing to think we have got it all figured out because we have read a few books or studies. there's just one problem. You still can't trust your judgments, no matter how much knowledge you have. Being aware of that simple thought helps you make better informed decisions. Every time I am stuck in a thinking pattern, I try to break away by looking at the list of cognitive biases. It's free and easy. Just go to the Wikipedia for list of cognitive biases. You will find that most biases seem like common sense, and that's exactly the point. Cognitive biases explain our illogical behavior. Look at facts. I hate assumptions and yet I assume things all the time. When someone don't answer my email, I assume they don't care. When someone apologize, I assume it's not genuine. When I have a headache, I assume I'm ill. I know I'm not practical because assumptions are not facts. If you want to think straight, you discard all assumptions and only look at facts. William James said it best in one of his lectures about pragmatism. The pragmatist clings to facts and concreteness, observes truth at its work in particular cases and generalizes. To make things simple, let's look at two ways of making a decision, on one based on facts and the other based on assumptions. Assumptions, opinions, imagination, beliefs, guesses. Facts, research, statistics, experiments tested. Does your product solve a problem or do you assume it does? Are you able to raise money for your startup or do you assume you will? Will you get a raise or do you assume your boss will give it to you? Is the sale a done deal or do you assume your client will sign? Do people like your art or do you assume they don't? I like to avoid assumptions as much as I can. I prefer to look at facts and then draw conclusions. What if you can't rely on facts? Well, sometimes you just can't find facts, or you have to make a quick decision. In those very rare cases, I prefer gut feeling. Whatever you do, never waste your thoughts on other people's ill informed opinions and guesses. True versus untrue. In the previous chapter, we talked about looking at facts. But are facts also the truth? The answer is no. Confusing, right? It's just like life. For example, does God exist? I don't know. I have never seen any evidence. Does that mean God is not real? It doesn't matter what I think. If God has an impact on the way you live, it's true for you no matter what scientists say. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, who had a profound impact on Western philosophy, famously said, "There are no facts, only interpretations." Nietzsche was a man of true self knowledge. Sigmund Freud even said that he had a more penetrating knowledge of himself than any other man who ever lived or was ever likely to live. He was a very analytical thinker, especially when it came to his own thoughts. When it isn't said that there are no facts, he meant that we as human beings ultimately rely on our interpretations of reality. There's no way to confirm reality objectively. That doesn't mean nothing is real and that we are all living in a big dream. We just have to realize that facts are not the same thing as the truth. That simple thought saves you a lot of energy because it means no one can be right or wrong. Don't bother with convincing people with different opinions of the truth. It's just not a practical thing to do. Save your energy for other more useful things. Lessons from Think Straight by Darius Forox. It teaches us how to gain mental clarity, overcome overthinking, and take control of our lives. Here are the key lessons from the book. First, clear thinking leads to a better life. Our thoughts shape our reality. If we think negatively, we will see problems everywhere. By training our minds to focus on solutions, we create a more positive life. Second, overthinking is the root of many problems. Most people get stuck in indecision because they overanalyze everything. Instead of thinking too much, we should focus on taking action. Focus only on what you can control. Worrying about things beyond your control wastes energy. Instead, focus on what you can change your actions, choices, and mindset. This shift in focus reduces stress and increases productivity. Fourth, simple thinking is powerful thinking. Complexity creates confusion, while simplicity leads to clarity. Avoid unnecessary details and focus on the core of any problem. The best solutions are often the simplest ones. Fifth, purpose driven thinking brings success. Knowing what you want in life helps you make better decisions. Without a clear purpose, your mind will be distracted by unimportant things. Define your goals. Perfectionism is a trap. Striving for perfection often leads to procrastination. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, take action now. Progress is important than perfection. Seventh, you can train your mind. Just like physical fitness, mental fitness requires practice. Techniques like mindfulness, meditation, and journaling help improve thinking. Developing a habit of clear thinking leads to long term success. Final takeaway: Think Straight teaches us that by mastering our thoughts, we can simplify our lives, make better decisions, and achieve our goals faster. The key is to focus on what truly matters, take action, and avoid overcomplicating things. Darius Forox's book Think Straight focuses on how to take control of your thoughts and take better decisions in life. Book Gang, thanks for listening. Let's commit to make a difference starting today. Let's move forward with a purpose and passion. Thank you for being a part of this journey. I hope you leave today inspired and motivated. To all my book lovers, thank you. Keep reading, keep exploring, and keep sharing the love of books. Until next time, happy reading. Do comment and click the bell icon to get the notification when the video is published. Do support the channel and share your thoughts on the comment section, and share this video with your friends and family who instill a love for reading books and who love to hear audiobooks. This is the part 1 of Think Straight. Change your thoughts, change your life. by Darius Forox, and the next part will be uploaded. Thank you for listening, and like, share, and subscribe the channel.